Part of the original
The original eight, but it was having been, I guess they got down on the site. The question I'll ask you is, you know, last I heard is 2006. Usually take, can you estimate the test from our past experience?
Questions we've got here, we've got
Nice Samantha. We're not built on top of the toxic waste dump. We're still trying to get amendment and start to clean up.
You have to listen to the other side. I've listened to the other side.
What Samantha said is that she had sent him information contradicting
I got it.
I live in it.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's the big question.
What I really want to know yes, that was the head guy. How you doing? Nice to see you. Well, not too many episodes.
a minute. You can ask them, I don't know, but we do have, there, I mean, there's several meetings Right. Yeah, but I mean, you can ask them, I don't Yes, right.
But I want to get It's right behind the road. Now, we're not in the rally, but we've got a great boundary here. We've got right there.
Folks, can I have your attention? Folks, can I have your attention, please? Folks, can I get your attention? First, I'm Franklin Hill. I'm the Superfund Division Director in Region 4. I want to thank you all for coming out tonight. I know I've heard some of the complaints outside that we should have had a bigger room and a forum for a big public meeting. But we chose this forum for a number of different reasons. We have EPA staff scattered throughout the room. Anyone with an EPA shirt on you can grab and talk to about specific issues as it relates to the site. And we're prepared to give individuals the information that you're seeking tonight. Because what we want to do is we want to calm the issues and the fears that have been created as a result of the most recent temporary relocations that we had here that are associated with the site. Those temporary relocations happen for a reason. And that's the thing that we want to talk about, is that specific reason and why we had those temporary relocations. They all center around the lowering of the toxicity level for TCE. It quite frankly has nothing to do with the change at the site. The site conditions remain the same. As we look at air concentrations based on the 2007-2008 data, based on some of the existing data that we know about in groundwater and the saturated and unsaturated zones, based on what we know about how efficient or proficient the SVE system was on the site. So we have a lot of information on this site. And so we made a decision a couple of weeks ago, mainly based on the best available science that EPA has at this point in time that centers around the toxicity levels for TCE. And that happened for a number of different reasons. Glenn Adams, is Glenn here? Before I go any further, let me just give you some key people so you'll know who they are and if you want to ask any particular questions. Glenn Adams is the chief of the technical services section, who's the guy who managed the aspects of technical services and risk assessment. And Glenn helped calculate and formulate this new number that we have, which triggered the action that we took a couple of weeks ago. Don Rigger is over on the back side here. Most of you guys know Don. Don is the remedial branch chief who's been managing this, has a long history with the CTS site. I think most of you know that. Rich Campbell is in the back here as well, who's the section manager. Where's Samantha?
in front of you.
Samantha's right here. I know most of you know Samantha. She's talking to you guys pretty regularly with community updates, keeping you informed on the site and what's happening. We've got Angela, who's here, who's the community involvement coordinator. Where are the other folks in the back there? All right. We've got Pinkney, who's with press. Ophia is back here with technical services. So we've got folks in the room tonight to talk to you all. I know it's a small room. It's not a big public forum. That is going to be coming. The power group is here. I know I saw Tate. Mr. McQueen, I didn't recognize you because I think you've done something interesting. I think you've lost a couple pounds since the last time I saw you. Good job. But I didn't recognize you outside, and I apologize for that.
Maybe the most truthful.
But we want to talk to you all, and then we want to, allow people to come in and get the information that they need, because we do want to calm the fears. This is not an issue where the whole community is at risk. We've done a lot at this site from the standpoint of providing filtration systems and protecting people from a drinking water perspective. This is an air issue. And folks, the air will fluctuate based on a number of different factors that we know at the site, and we're going to talk about that. But that is the main reason we're here. You don't have a site that has changed since we started our investigation and the work that we've done. We have a toxicity level that has changed, that is causing us to react in a different way to protect people. So if we find information that would lead us to do something different or to advise you on, we're certainly going to advise you of that. I don't want to frighten everyone in the room. That is not what EPA's goal is. Our goal is to be transparent with you, as we have always been, as it relates to this site. And so we're going to continue to do that. I know we've been trying to talk to you about this site. So we will continue to do that. So I'm going to ask Glenn to come up and talk just a little bit about the toxicity level and why it changed and where it was. It has changed drastically, which caused us to take this action. But this change was specific to the 3 residential properties that we identified. So it was not a widespread type of an issue for the whole public at large to be alarmed about. And if people have told you that, they have misinformed you. And so we are going to do some additional testing at the request of some folks who are in close proximity to the stream or in close proximity to those properties that we tested the last time to further confirm that. And if it doesn't confirm that, we'll be the first to tell you that there is an issue that we need to do something about it, that we need to address. But we're going to inform you of it. It is not something, and I'll repeat, this is not something for the public at large to panic about. This is an issue where the agency took an action to protect the citizens of this community that were directly impacted, and we'll continue to do that. We've done that in the past, and we'll continue to do it here. I can't speak for the folks who disagree with me. You have your opinion. We can agree to disagree in part tonight. But what I'm hopeful of is that we can have a professional discussion and a technical discussion about the aspects of this site and what your concerns are. People have property in this neighborhood. We're concerned about your property values. We're concerned about it because, number one, we don't want to release information to folks. People have been hard on us because we have not released information at large about individual residential properties. Well, that's not our goal. It's to put personal identifiable information out into the public domain. So people will continue to have a problem with our approach on that. We don't post data that isn't quality assured and gone through a quality control process. Once it goes through that and we take all the personal information out of it, then we will release that data. That takes time. And so bear with me on the process to get to that data. But individuals that we're sampling, and those people know who they are, when we sample your property, we're committed to communicating with you as quickly as possible about those data results. And we'll continue to do that. Okay? So that's what we're going to try to do tonight, is just talk a little bit about what's going on in this community. We've got folks who we've worked with in this community a long time, and we want to continue to do that. I would really like to cultivate a positive relationship in this community where we can talk about the details and the aspects of what's going on at this site in a way that's positive. It doesn't have to be confrontational. It doesn't have to be a screaming match. We can be respectful of one another and have an informed conversation and talk about the risk and talk about the actions. You know, we're not that far apart. We agree that we need to take some action, but we need to understand, quite frankly, what that action is. We don't need to just throw a bunch of things at the site and hope for a good result. We need to understand exactly what it is we're going after, at what depths, and what concentrations, and how to do it. And how to do it in a technically sound way that's going to produce results. Now, would you have me go out and just start digging blindly, knowing that I can't solve the problem? Would you?
I don't think anybody's asked you that.
Okay.
No. I mean, apparently you did do that because you took sites to examine first off that were possibly contaminated so far away from the plant that you didn't get any results. And that's why we're in one of the problems we're in right now.
Ma'am, that is a nice opinion about
It's not an
what's
opinion.
happening. Let me just
We have the documents.
let me explain something to you. And I don't want to be confrontational with you about this. I really don't. Because, you
I
know,
don't care.
my goal is, I know, but I care.
Okay, well, did you care when you did the soil extraction and released how many pounds of contaminants were released into the air while that was being pulled out of the ground, running night and day? I saw it coming out. How many pounds of contaminant were released into the communities around there?
Well-
6,000, we have a document that
Well,
says 6,000
again,
pounds
that's
of
a-
contaminants.
Again,
So do you see why we have a problem?
okay, this is why I did not want to have a big public forum. I want to talk to individuals about what's going on. So this is not a grandstanding opportunity. This is an
No, it's not
opportunity for people
grandstanding.
to really talk about the specifics of the site. And we can talk about the SVE system.
Yeah.
We can talk about the work that we've conducted at the site. So again, I'm going to let Glenn talk about the toxicity values and why we took the action and what changed that caused us to take the action. The site really has not changed. Glenn?
Excuse me. Again, my name's Glenn Adams with Technical Services Section Toxicologist at EPA Region 4. In 2011, or before 2011, the value we used to make a determination whether we had unacceptable risk, the value we used before 2011 was 120 micrograms per cubic meter. After September of 2011, EPA had published some new studies, or used new studies to publish a new toxicity value, which changed our level down to 6 of where our level of concern was. So in early 2012, we started trying to get access and start doing vapor intrusion studies near the site. We did some of those studies in 2012. We did some more in 2014. In those studies, when the 2014 data came in consultation with our headquarters, with actually toxicologists in Region 9, which is out in San Francisco, and some toxicologists in Region 10, looking at what they've done, we decided to take our number even a step lower to the 2, which is what most of you have heard about. That 2 is designed to protect women in their first trimester of pregnancy. It's a 3-week exposure window. We don't know when that is, so that's why that number is so low. If you're not pregnant, if you're a child, or if you're an adult, the number's still the 6 value. So that there was some confusion on that. So, but right now, again, Ms. Franklin is correct. The data we have from back then, we made a judgment based on the toxicity values we had then. They changed in late 2011 and changed again, at least our interpretation of it changed again in 2014. So I'll be around here, Althea is around here, the Department of Health is over here on the left, on your right, that can try to talk to you about any specific thing. But our goal is to talk to the individuals, so if you have any personal questions you can ask, and everybody else doesn't have to listen to it. More than, or welcome to.
I'm sorry, I think that most of us would like to hear what the questions are from other people and what your responses are, so we're better informed. And having to stand up is very difficult for many people. So can we sit down?
I do have several chairs around the room.
No,
for,
but I mean, you don't have
for
people
people
that
that can't
everybody
stand.
sit.
This was designed so that people could come in and move out at some point in time. But if this is the only crowd that we have,
I think that it is. I just checked outside.
okay, if this is the only crowd that we have,
No, this is capacity, they wouldn't let anyone else in.
Okay.
I just looked out and they told me there wasn't anybody else.
Well, they were stopping people from coming in.
all right. Well, that is not our intent. Our intent was to really get one-on-one with individuals and explain to you the details of the site and what has happened and why we took the action, and to also calm your fears that this isn't some widespread problem that everyone should run off and be concerned about. That is definitely not the case here. As we continue to investigate the site, we're going to try and quickly come up with a solution to deal with the issue, being our primary concern is those folks that we temporarily relocated. We definitely want to deal with that source at the stream. And then we're also going to be looking at some of the natural sources.
There's chairs right over there.
Would you give her a chair?
There's chairs right over
Please,
there.
somebody pass her a chair. She didn't have to sit on the floor. Please, thank you.
Thank you very much.
And so we want to talk about that. Samantha is here as well. I want to give her an opportunity to talk to you all just a little bit. I know she sent everyone an email this morning, a personal email, to explain the details of the data as it relates to Southside Village, as it relates to the eastern side of the facility, and as it relates to the temporary relocations that we took to try and correct some of the misinformation that was reported earlier in the media. We tried to deal with that from a standpoint of giving you the information based on the data results that we have. And there is a time frame in there when, quite frankly, we did not take that action because we didn't have the information or we didn't have the access. And so now access has been granted. We have worked with those additional property owners to gain access for the additional sampling that we're going to conduct. And so we're going to try to get out and do the additional sampling to calm those fears even more, that the further you get away from the site, the ambient air issues or indoor air issues are not an issue. Samantha?
And it's like Franklin said, and I sent out in a mass email recently, the concentrations that we detected in Southside Village, indoor air and basements.
We can't hear you.
Sorry. The concentrations that we detected in Southside Village in the indoor air, crawl space, basements have been below. We went back and reviewed historical data. It's below our new action level, depending on the results. The concentration that we detected in 2014 on the properties to the east were above the action level. So that's why we offer temporary relocation to those families. We have, because all of those concentrations were above 2 micrograms per cubic meter, which is our most conservative value for women of childbearing years, we have expanded that sampling grid. And so we are out here this week collecting samples for homeowners that are in close proximity to those sites. And depending on those results, we may expand the grid further. It's just, how many homes? 7 homes.
Can you explain the deficiency of sampling to the northwest of the summit of the site? The original waste handling practices of the site took the contamination to the northwest. I note in all the data that there is virtually no groundwater wells to the northwest of the elevation of the summit. And we have a map of your 2009 vapor studies. And what's very interesting, I did have a chance to, I saw you guys.
Speak up, please.
Speak up, okay. I don't have a very high loud voice here. Okay, we know some of the places that you sampled today. You went back and resampled a lot of the same locations. You went down here, Concord Road, probably where Walt Dawkins used to live, the Robinsons. But I look at the values and the ambient air values down here, and they were somewhere in the neighborhood of, this is in parts per billion, but they were much lower than 3 of the samples taken in ambient air to the northwest of the property up here. And the problem and the issue that we are concerned about at this site is the ambient air concentration. As much as, so there's 2 ways you get vapor in your home. One is through the soil under your home, and the other is in the ambient concentration. And we believe Dr. Wilcox is here, he's an expert at this, but we believe that a lot of the vapor concentrations are, like the springs, coming off the surface water. And there are surface water concentrations in the Southside Village. It's actually the Duckett Powell property, which is no longer part of Southside Village, but a part of the CTS original property, and where the plume and everything exist, that are higher or very close to, let's see, we have one ambient air sample that's at,
This is what was reported on the news last week, that there was one that was 5.3 outside, which doesn't trigger any
indoor.
Which doesn't trigger any action because it's outside, but it's immediately outside the window of people who live in Southside Village. And so I've been encouraging people, they need their indoor air tested, not in the crawl space where there's no windows, but they need it tested in their living space with the windows open, or at least be warned to not open your windows, because what is outside is close to, or exceeding, if you're a woman of childbearing age, it's close to the limits. So really, the whole sampling in the crawl space is based on the fact that it's coming from the soil. But even at Terry's house, the soil gas was no detect. So it's coming in from the outside air. And so I feel like the testing should be done in the house with the windows open.
Okay.
Because that's the worst case scenario.
Okay, the crawl space samples over in Southside Village, closest to the springs, had vents opening, so air was coming inside through open vents. The highest level in 2008 was 5.3, which is still below the 6.3 level. The highest concentration in 2012 was 0.67, which is way below the 2 point, or the 2
But some people
micrograms per
sleep with their
cubic
windows open and a fan in the window.
The
That's different than a vent.
concentrations that we've seen in the springs on the Southside Village side are much lower than what's on the east side. So our primary focus right now, the higher concentrations are on the east side.
Isn't one of the concerns the lack of temporal and spatial variability with your sampling? I mean, you have limited data points to draw conclusions from. So if you sampled in one event, 07, I know that the Rices begged and pleaded to get that sample in August 08. And then it wasn't sampled again until 12. You only have 3 different data points, and those are scattered over years when the spatial and temporal variability can fluctuate within an hour or 2 or 3. If EPA has already invested $11 million in this site and virtually zero cleanup of the Dean Apple, what's the harm in investing in $200 canisters and doing an appropriate risk assessment for the people in Southside Village, as well as down Concord Road, like in Walt Dawkins' house, where there are 4 children, or in the front house of the Robinsons, where Ethel died of pancreatic and liver cancer, where there was another young child, and there was vapor in those properties. So it seems to me that we're not talking about, when you're talking about science, it's not an actual complete picture, because there's a lack of data, because there's been a lack of sampling when it comes to the air.
We're sampling this week on similar properties.
Right, what I'm
We have
talking
done
about
sampling in
historically.
2012.
You
2008, 2007.
Right, but the term was used of historical sampling. And yes, you may use the word historical sampling, but that doesn't mean that you have a real history of sampling. It means you have 3 events. And Jeff, I think, could address the temporal and spatial variability issues.
And
as
I
could-
would encourage Glenn or Ophia to also speak to that.
I would say in the 2007, 2008, the values we're comparing to were 120. So they were at least 2 to 3 orders of magnitude higher than any levels we were concerned with. Again, late 2011, early 2012 is when this changed. We got back out in the field to start doing our studies.
But the wind direction changes, for example, so
that's why we're encircling the springs and how we're doing our sampling.
Right, so what I'm saying is back.
Could I ask you, how close would you let your children play to this area? I live 200 feet from this site directly to it.
Not easy.
What precaution would you take?
For
My children to play in the yard.
That's why your house is on the list.
Terry
to
Rice,
sample.
my brother's already been evacuated. I'm less than 125 feet from where he lives. Can my children still play outside?
Yes, sir.
Should I be frightened and
this is going, and
panicking? Would your children play outside?
Yes, sir.
They would? Then bring them over.
So mine are a lot older than yours right now, but the thing we're doing is, again, we're stepping out. We found the contamination in the ring we did. We're stepping out to the next ring.
Okay.
As far as I know, you're in that loop.
Well, I appreciate you and Franklin putting this meeting together. I'm very comfortable with the setting. I appreciate the ambition of your team, ready to move forward and take care of this. And I'm looking forward for complete effort and honesty for everyone. Because it's our responsibility and our integrity as a community to work together and stand for what is right. I was raised by a military soldier. I will stand and fight for this country, foreign and domestic. And we must stand together, united, and make a change and a difference. Because if we don't, we know what's going to happen to our country. into what we live in.
Hey,
We know exactly what to do already.
Samantha, how many tests are actually being done that you're looking at right now?
We're looking at 7 different homes and also a couple other ambient air samples outside of homes. It's
It
going
just
to
really
kind of
concerns me
circle.
when I know it's 57 acres. I mean, 57 acres, and that's not many samples. I mean, can you explain that? I don't get it. I mean, 57 acres is huge.
We're focusing on the 3 homes that we had excess of 2 micrograms per cubic meter. We're stepping it out, we're doing an outer ring. So that's what we're doing now. Depending on those results, if we get concentrations above 2 micrograms per cubic meter, we'll step it out a further ring. We're gonna step it out until we,
Still doesn't sound like,
Let me ask you, Dingle Creek runs to the northwest. It runs, it's one of the 2 streams that flow from the site. If you go down towards Sweeten Creek, past where the site ends, there's a little home there where there's a child's swing set up right next to the creek down there. Rebecca Bowe, who did the 2007 story on the site, the Mountain Express sampled that stream, and it was 600 parts per billion in an eddy in the stream. And are you going to do any sampling to the northwest? You know, that's the one thing that's remarkable about this site. This is a hill, and the contaminant is heavier than water, and all the sampling has been presumed to go in one direction. And it sort of defies, logic and science. And the truth is, in the history of all your sampling, I think in 2009 there was a proposed plan to put some groundwater monitoring wells to the northwest. Those were abandoned and all moved to the summit or to the southeast of the summit. Why is it when all the waste handling practices of the site took the direction to the northwest, there is a retaining pond with a canal gate that's still existing on Southside Village with a flume that went into Dingle Creek, and you've done virtually no sampling in that direction. And can you explain deficiency of any sampling in that direction?
That sampling that you're talking about is surely essential, and that's part of our remedial investigation, which is further down the road. We're developing that work plan right now. Right now, our primary focus is air contamination, protecting people's drinking water, and addressing the source.
Right.
The next phase is defining the extent of contamination, so that will certainly be part of the remedial investigation.
Well, one of the, you all know about the order that was implemented back in 2002, which anticipated and was concerned about the migration of the source. And what we're dealing with here, in this case, is a remote exposure issue where the groundwater is surfacing and getting into the air. But your removal order addressed the source and the concern that that source might migrate. And what are you going to do as far as the DNAP that Dr. Wilcox so well explained is different from the LNAPL plume that you defined? Are you going to go and deal with the source, which was the intent of Dr. Webster back in 2002 to address, to cut off contribution to the groundwater and to stop the migration of the DNAPL in the fissure system? What are you going to do?
If I can try to address some of those, and I'm not as familiar with this site as Samantha or you, so I'll give you that right up front. But when we go out and looking at studying the emergency response action memo you're talking about, our goal in that program is to stop exposure. It's not to clean up the groundwater, it's not to do anything else, but stop exposure. That's how we do it. So what's happened here, and it's taken years, I know, but we found I think we've identified every well out there that we think is contaminated, and they're all protected with some way to stop any exposure. Either it's hooked up because you have public water supply, or it's got a filter system on it. So that exposure has been removed. The air, again, the old values from the older data, we were acting within those. When the toxicity values dropped, we started sampling again, trying to see if we had levels above those of concern. We found some, we're taking an action on that, and we're stepping out. So I know y'all have been dealing with this for a long time, and nothing's moving quick enough. We all understand that, but we are trying to address this. We're trying to address the exposures first. The groundwater is contaminated. We're going to have to address that groundwater. But working, I have hydrogeologists that work for me. Talk to them. I'm definitely not a hydrogeologist. But every time we've ever dealt with NAFLs, DNAFLs especially, it takes a while to find where it is so that we can then work to clean that up.
The problem with TCE contaminated groundwater, it's very difficult to really deal with it.
Yes, it is.
Where you deal best with TCE is when you get the source, when you can identify
Fully
the
agree.
source and you can remove it. You have identified the source. It has been located under the
No,
building.
I don't believe we
Well, it's
have.
migrated.
So we know where some of the source is. We have to do some further studies to find the real source, the bigger part of it. There's no way in the area that we're talking about, I think where we had the conversation a couple of weeks ago, is right on the property in the first 40 feet till it hits bedrock. My opinion, and I'm not a hydrogeologist, we could go dig up the whole area under that. It would help, but it's not going to solve the problem with contaminated groundwater. We've got to find where the whole source is and go after it. And that's what we're still trying to do in the remedial investigation that Samantha's working on.
You found a very concentrated amount underneath, I think it was BH3, borehole 3 in the middle of the building.
And we can start working on that, but we still have to find the rest of the source, which is going to take more scientific work. I know nobody wants to hear that, but it does.
But here's the other component of all this. This original order was time critical because it anticipated the concern that the bulk contaminant itself can migrate. And you are going to find new sources elsewhere because it can travel in the fractures and fissures and it can end up elsewhere.
We're going to look for that.
And if you know where it is and you identified where it was in 2002, you go after that and you do not delay on that one.
To my knowledge, we have not identified where it is in the fractures. That is work still to be done.
1.1 million parts per billion is a pretty high concentration.
I agree.
So you go after that.
We can go after that, but digging it up is not the solution by itself. And so it's a part of the solution.
Yeah.
So right now, our goal is to try to alleviate the air coming out of the springs, that is going to ambient air, while we continue to work on getting the whole source. That's the goal.
Let me interject for just a second, I'm sorry. Because if you don't want to stand here, I want you to be able to go. But there were several people from Hidden Valley and Southside Village that had specific questions about air quality. So would you please speak up, or do you want to see somebody?
We're from Hidden Valley, and we're right up the hill from the evacuated home. We're very close to it, and we're a CVS site, and we have 2 young children in our house. We are privately sampling our indoor air. We sent the test off today, and we got a soil sample as well because we're not on the testing spectrum from you guys. And I have smelled the sweet smell in our street a number of times at the base of our driveway when I take walks with the kids at night in the evenings, which is very concerning to me. And I don't know when, my curiosity is those concentric circles, you're not testing in Hidden Valley at this point, correct, at all?
Correct, we're going to
But
sample.
we're right
one of
next
the
to where you
evacuated
evacuated the
homes
houses.
is in the backyard of 3 of our houses.
We're going to be
Literally.
sampling in your backyard, basically.
We have a great representation of Hidden Valley
Yeah, but
right
why wouldn't
now.
you test where people live?
We're going to be
that's-
testing
that's-
it.
that's-
back.
that's-
right behind me.
And we
Yeah,
are.
what if our tests come back as
We don't
high-
want to
high
cry about
levels?
air quality,
Then
but
please call us immediately.
Why don't
we never calls you. That's the point.
But I will tell you, if you're sampling just the indoor air, you really need to do.
Well, we can't afford
We can't
$1,500 to do
$1,500
everything, so we have to do
That if you
what's
come up
deemed to
with-
be
We could come with
dangerous.
that.
If you come up with a high level indoor air,
Then we have to get out.
but it may not be as a result of this site. That is why we're trying to step out.
So
and
so
try
you're
to
telling me we have a
identify-
high concentration of TCE, it's probably not from this site?
No, I'm not. I'm
That's
just
what you
saying.
just said, is it couldn't be from this site.
I'm saying if
maybe.
you don't have all the information, that's why we're trying to step this out
If you
and
would
get
like
the
to come
information as
test,
we
get the
go.
information, we would be happy to let you
Yes.
test at our home.
Go
If
ahead
you'd like to do a full
And we
spectrum
should
test
have
from
these
your end.
results next week. We've got a good representation
But you aren't even in our
of
development yet.
Hidden Valley.
Yeah.
We're right there.
Before another politician or government employee talks, can another Hidden Valley resident talk for a
Yes,
second?
sir.
Thank you. I agree wholeheartedly with these folks here, and especially considering where they're located, that they should have the indoor and outdoor air quality done outside their home. I'm slightly on the other side of the community, but still, there's a lot of scared people in our neighborhood. And I think you folks are wonderful. I think you're trying to do a good job. But you do realize it's a very valid question. And I know for a fact, it's been mentioned a couple of times, that these 2 streams, Dingle Creek and this other creek that runs across Mills Gap Road where my daughter's bus stop is, was, until recently, that they found high concentrations of TCE in the air that's evaporating over those streams. What about this other stream that runs right down through Hidden Valley and crosses over Mills Gap Road? Has anyone done any testing there?
There's no life left in that stream. There were salamanders. There's a large portion of it. There's no.
That's my concern, because it used to be full. It used to be full of crayfish
Right.
10 years ago when I moved in. There were all kinds of creatures living in those streams, and the kids used to go down and play in the streams and bring the animals out. And now the kids don't find any animals, and well, of course, nobody wants their kids down there anymore anyway.
No, they stay in our homes, but
There's a lot of, these are valid, rational concerns from, nobody's yelling at you.
yeah.
We just want testing done, and we want the testing expanded as soon as possible. My understanding is one of the families voluntarily left their home this week. Pretty prominent family,
Yeah.
moved out voluntarily. I won't speak for them.
We've been considering that as well. I mean, we're having our air tested, but
Glenn, one of the issues that Barry was bringing up was the last page of that enforcement order from 2002. It said the conditions at the site will worsen if an removal action is not taken and completed. That was in 2002, and that was based on the 830,000 mark that Barry was bringing up. The same exact spot, 4 feet shallow, where it's now 1.1 million parts per billion. So, you're hitting the source, right? And if we're talking about the vapor, one thing that everybody should know is that the vapor issues come from the springs more than anything, correct? So if the springs are impacted by the groundwater, if you don't address the groundwater, which is the purpose of that order that Mr. Webster and Mr. Rigger signed off on, they signed off on that order in 2002, and nothing was done really to deal with that order, and as a result, we're now seeing people evacuated. And that was 2002.
So that order was a removal order. Our authority under that does not include groundwater. So we couldn't tell CTS to clean up the groundwater in 2002. What we did was we did an SVE system that was above the groundwater table and up to the surface, and we removed TCE through that. It wasn't until we got the site listed on the NPL, which was, as you know, an incredible hurdle, and we did, I think there were 5 separate times that we tried to do that, and it's a score, it's a numerical score, it's not something that's easy to explain, but I can tell you, we tried, and State of North Carolina worked on the site, and when we finally got it listed, 2012, since that time, Samantha, I believe, has made a lot of progress, and I know it doesn't help when you think back to 2002, but we were basically, we had our hands tied until we got it on the NPL, which it now is. CTS is now, they've done the NAPL study, and we're starting to get a picture of what needs to be done. But we have a groundwater problem, not a soil problem.
What's the NPL?
National
Priorities List.
Say it again.
National Priority List.
So there's
Reserved for worst sites.
there's about 1,500 sites around America that are on that list. There's 250 in the southeast, and that's where we derive our authority to tell the company to do the cleanup. And until we can get it on the list, we couldn't tell the company to clean up the groundwater. Now we did some things to protect people. We sampled people's wells. We hooked people up if they were contaminated. We've done the air sampling, but we were not able to clean up the groundwater until we got it on the list. And so that's that.
I beg to differ just on one point, because yes, you want to clean up the groundwater, but what was recognized in that order was that there was a source that was contributing to the concentration of groundwater, and the objective of that order was to cut off contribution to the groundwater, and it was a time-critical document. I never knew what that meant until I did a little research. And the United States Coast Guard defines time-critical action as remedial action beginning within 6 months. That order was written in April, and the objective was to get that source. And you let some time go by, and that source has done what it predictable. But there's enough bulk source there by virtue of the fact they found the 1.1 million in the initial sampling. And I think it's very important to point out that this is not just a groundwater. This is still a source, concentrated source issue that you have to address. And what's unique about this site and different about this site from other sites is the source, the contaminant source, is at the top of the mountain, the top of the hill. And
Barry, hold on just a second. Because we were here about air quality, Glenn's going to take whoever is here from Hidden Valley, Southside Village and talk to you guys over there. Sir, if you wanted to go over there and talk to Glenn, he's back there in the back. If you have air quality questions, Glenn's back there.
I'm sorry, I was sort of trying to help this get on.
Yeah, well, we were talking about the same thing.
Yes, and if you have health questions, we have North Carolina Department of Health and Human
You're right,
Services.
there is a source, and it's in the groundwater. So we could.
They're right there at that table. Dr. Langley's over there, Sandy Moore, and Mercedes, they're all at this table over here. They've got handouts. Specific to. And then if you have other EPA questions, just specify with EPA or not. Okay.
That's exactly what I thought, divide and conquer.
Did you have specific?
And, you know, I asked Victoria